The company I built erased my name. My name is Charlotte Morgan, though nearly everyone who knew me back then called me Charlie. I was 34 years old on the morning Morgan Thompson Group informed me that I no longer belonged inside the company I had helped build. It happened on a cold Tuesday in November. I was sitting at my desk with lukewarm coffee in one hand, scrolling through quarterly reports with the other, when an email appeared between a vendor invoice and a meeting reminder. The subject line read, "Notice of termination." For several seconds, I simply stared at it. I remember hearing keyboards clicking outside my office. Someone laughed near the elevators. The heating vent above me rattled as though it were struggling to breathe. Everything sounded normal. That was what made the email feel impossible. I opened it. "Dear Ms. Morgan, we regret to inform you that your employment with Morgan Thompson Group has been terminated, effective immediately." I read the sentence 3 times. Then I searched for an explanation, convinced there had been some administrative mistake. There was none. The rest of the message contained sterile language about returning company equipment, signing separation documents, and contacting human resources regarding my compensation package. My hands began trembling. I had not merely worked there, I had helped create the company. After college, Adrian Thompson and I had spent nights designing prototypes from the kitchen table of a cheap apartment. We survived on frozen meals and borrowed money. I wrote the first operating platform, negotiated our earliest contracts, and convinced our first major investor not to walk away when Adrian arrived 20 minutes late to the meeting. Adrian was not only my business partner, he had been my boyfriend for 5 years. The man who had asked me to browse wedding venues with him the previous Sunday had apparently approved an email firing me on Tuesday morning. I called him. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. Finally, I sent a message. "HR says I've been terminated. Tell me this is a mistake." His response arrived less than a minute later. "It isn't a mistake. The board decided to move in a different direction. We need to talk later." The words were too polished, too distant. Adrian never wrote like that to me. His messages were normally full of half-finished sentences, unnecessary emojis, and complaints about meetings. I typed, "What direction removes the person who developed half the company's technology?" The typing indicator appeared, then disappeared. A second later, another message came. "Please don't make this harder than it already is." That sentence broke something inside me. I stood so quickly that my chair struck the wall. When I opened my office door, the hallway became unnaturally quiet. Employees avoided my eyes. A few stared at their monitors with exaggerated concentration. Others whispered behind raised hands. They already knew. Perhaps they had known before I did. I grabbed my coat and walked toward the elevators. Every step felt like I was crossing territory that had once belonged to me, but had already been claimed by strangers. The company was hosting an investor presentation that evening at the Hawthorne Hotel. Adrian had told me it was a routine celebration for our upcoming expansion. Suddenly, I needed to know what they were celebrating. When I reached the hotel, the ballroom was glowing with chandeliers and champagne towers. Morgan Thompson Group's silver logo covered a screen behind the stage. Employees, investors, and industry reporters filled the room. A company supposedly eliminating executive positions had spared no expense. Adrian stood beneath the lights in a tailored navy suit. He looked calm, handsome, and completely untouched by the destruction of my life. "Our future has never been brighter," he told the crowd. "Tonight marks the beginning of a stronger and more focused Morgan Thompson Group." Applause erupted. I pushed through the crowd. "Adrian." His voice stopped mid-sentence. Hundreds of faces turned toward me. For one fleeting moment, fear flashed across his expression. Then his face hardened. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," I said. "Why am I receiving a termination notice from the company I helped build?" Whispers moved across the ballroom. Adrian stepped away from the microphone. "This is neither the time nor the place. You ignored my calls. Because the decision has already been made." "By whom?" "By the board. I am on the board." A few people exchanged uncomfortable looks. Adrian's jaw tightened. "Not anymore." The words landed with such force that the room seemed to tilt. I had signed documents during the previous month's restructuring. Adrian had claimed they were routine amendments required for the future IPO. I had trusted him enough to sign after only a brief review. Now I understood. He had not simply fired me. He had quietly stripped away my authority first. A woman near the stage whispered loudly, "She really thought dating the CEO made her important." Someone behind her chuckled. Another man said, "Adrian carried her for years." I turned toward him. He had joined the company 18 months earlier. I had personally approved his hiring. Adrian raised the microphone again. "Charlotte is no longer associated with Morgan Thompson Group. As we prepare for our next phase, certain positions have become incompatible with our vision." "Incompatible?" I repeated. "I created the system you're taking public." His eyes narrowed. "Security." Two guards began moving toward me. "Adrian, look at me." He did, but I saw no trace of the man who had once slept beside me. "I am looking at you," he said quietly. "That is why I know you need to leave." The guards took my arms. As they escorted me through the crowd, applause suddenly broke out behind me. Adrian had announced salary increases and promotions, carefully timing everyone's celebration with my humiliation. Near the doorway, someone kicked the back of my leg. I stumbled. A woman's voice followed me into the hallway. "Good riddance. Maybe the company can finally grow without her ego." Outside, freezing rain struck my face. I stood beneath the hotel awning, staring at the city lights through blurred vision. My phone buzzed repeatedly, but I could not bring myself to look. I told myself that the worst had already happened. I was wrong. The following morning, Human Resources allowed me 30 minutes to collect my personal belongings. When I opened my office door, my cousin Paige Morgan was sitting behind my desk. She wore a cream blouse, gold earrings, and the satisfied smile of someone trying not to appear satisfied. "Rough morning?" she asked. Paige had joined the company 6 months earlier as a strategy consultant. My mother had pressured me to hire her after Paige's previous business failed. "She needs family support," Mom had said. Apparently, Paige believed family support included taking my office. 3 cardboard boxes sat near the wall. My laptop, photographs, notebooks, and awards had been thrown inside without care. Paige picked up a framed picture of Adrian and me from our 4th anniversary. "This one probably doesn't belong to you anymore." I stared at her. "What did you say?" She tilted the frame toward me. "You should learn to recognize when something has been replaced." The implication was unmistakable. I crossed the room and snatched the photograph from her hand. "You helped him do this." Paige laughed softly. "You always assume everything revolves around you." This was my office. Not anymore. This was my company. Technically, it was Adrian's company. "You should have paid more attention to the paperwork." My rage rose so quickly it frightened me. I placed the frame into the box before I shattered it against the wall. "How long?" Paige's smile flickered. "How long what?" "You know exactly what I'm asking." She leaned back in my chair. "Maybe you should ask your ex-boyfriend." The word ex-boyfriend sounded rehearsed. I left before I did something that would allow them to call me unstable. When I reached Adrian's office, I pushed the door open without knocking. He was standing near the windows, speaking on the phone. He ended the call immediately. "You can't keep storming in here. You gave Paige my office. She's taking over strategic operations." "And what else is she taking over?" His silence answered me. I felt my throat tighten, but I refused to cry in front of him. "We were discussing wedding venues 6 days ago." Adrian looked away. "Things changed." "Things don't change in 6 days." "No," he said. "Sometimes people simply stop pretending." The cruelty of that sentence stayed with me long after I left. That evening, I returned to the Hawthorne Hotel. I told myself I wanted proof, but some foolish part of me still hoped Paige had only been provoking me. The ballroom was empty except for the cleanup crew. I waited near the lobby until Adrian appeared. Paige walked beside him. Her arm was linked through his. They were laughing. Adrian pulled out a chair for her at the hotel bar. Paige leaned close while he spoke, her hand resting casually on his wrist. When their drinks arrived, they clinked glasses. "To new beginnings," Adrian said. Paige smiled. "And to finally getting what we deserve." Then he kissed her. I did not confront them. I stood behind a marble column, one hand pressed over my mouth, and watched the man I loved kiss the cousin I had brought into our company. My phone rang before I reached the parking garage. It was my mother. "Charlie, what have you done?" "What have I done?" "Paige called us. She said you attacked her at work and threatened Adrian." "I didn't attack anyone. She said you've become obsessed with controlling the company." "Mom, Adrian fired me. Paige took my office and they're having an affair." A long silence followed. Then my mother sighed. "You've always been jealous of Paige." I stopped walking. "Are you serious?" "Your father and I think you need distance from the family until you calm down." They had chosen her before asking for my side. By midnight, I had lost my position, my boyfriend, and the relatives who should have known me better than anyone. I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by the life Adrian and I had planned together. For the first time, I allowed myself to cry. I cried until grief became exhaustion. Then, shortly after 1 in the morning, my phone lit up with a message from Marcus Harrison, a former executive who had left Morgan Thompson Group after clashing with Adrian. "I heard what happened. They made the same mistake with you that they made with me. Meet me tomorrow. I may have an opportunity." I stared at the message through swollen eyes. Adrian and Paige believed they had erased me. My family believed I was finished. Perhaps even I had believed it for several hours. But as I looked at Marcus's message, something cold and determined began replacing my grief. They had taken the company I helped create, so I would build another one. And someday, when Morgan Thompson Group finally understood what it had lost, I would be the person deciding whether it deserved to survive. They celebrated too early. Marcus Harrison chose a quiet cafe 3 neighborhoods away from Morgan Thompson Group's headquarters. When I arrived, he was already seated near the back, stirring a cup of black coffee he did not appear to be drinking. He had once been one of the most respected executives in our company, but Adrian had pushed him out after Marcus challenged several questionable financial decisions. At the time, I had believed Adrian's explanation that Marcus had become difficult. Now I wondered how many lies I had accepted simply because they came from the man I loved. Marcus stood when he saw me. "You look terrible," he said. "Thank you." It wasn't an insult. "I know." I sat across from him and wrapped both hands around the warm cup the waitress placed in front of me. Marcus studied me for several seconds. "Do you know why Adrian removed you?" "Because he wanted Paige." "That is part of it." My eyes lifted. "What is the other part?" Marcus placed a thin folder on the table. Inside were reports, projected valuations, and copies of internal correspondence. Some documents carried dates from months earlier. "Adrian wants to take Morgan Thompson Group public," Marcus explained. "Investors were concerned that too much of the company's technology and client loyalty depended on you. So he fired the person the company depended on? He wanted to prove the company could function without you. He also needed control of the intellectual property before the IPO." My stomach tightened. "The restructuring documents?" Marcus nodded. "You transferred voting authority and development rights into a holding company controlled by Adrian. He told me it was temporary." "He lied." I closed the folder. "What does this have to do with your opportunity?" Marcus leaned forward. "I have investors. I have relationships with several clients who are already dissatisfied with Morgan Thompson Group. What I don't have is someone who can build the product." "You want me to work for you?" "No. I want you to build it with me." I almost laughed. "I just lost one company because I trusted the wrong partner." "Then don't trust me." His answer surprised me. Marcus slid another document across the table. "Have your own lawyer review everything. You will hold controlling shares. Your technology remains yours. Every major decision requires documented approval." I studied him carefully. "Why would you offer me control?" "Because I'm interested in building a successful company, not owning another human being's work." The words struck deeper than he intended. By the time I left the cafe, I had agreed to consider the proposal. By the following morning, I had decided to accept it. We called the new company North Star Systems. The name came from something my father used to tell me when I was a child, long before he decided Paige's version of events was easier to believe than mine. When everything around you changes, he would say, find the one thing that doesn't. For me, that thing was work. Marcus rented a small office downtown above a printing business and beside a dentist whose drill vibrated through the wall every afternoon. The carpet was stained, the fluorescent lights flickered, and the heating system worked only when someone kicked the panel near the supply closet. It was still the most beautiful office I had ever seen, because it was mine. Our first employees were two recent graduates, Lena Ortiz and Caleb Price. They were talented, underpaid, and enthusiastic enough to believe every problem could be solved with caffeine and another hour of work. For the first several weeks, the four of us did everything. I wrote code, answered calls, cleaned the break room, and assembled secondhand desks. Marcus handled investors and contracts. Lena tested the platform, while Caleb chased errors through endless lines of software. At night, when everyone left, I remained near the window, staring at Morgan Thompson Group's glowing headquarters several blocks away. There were evenings when I wanted to walk into Adrian's office and demand an explanation that would make sense of what he had done. Instead, I worked. Pain became discipline. Humiliation became fuel. 3 months after North Star opened, we completed the first version of a predictive logistics platform I had originally proposed at Morgan Thompson Group. Adrian had rejected it, claiming the market was not ready. Now 3 companies were competing to test it. Our first contract was modest compared to what Morgan Thompson handled, but when the agreement was signed, Lena brought a grocery store cake into the office. The icing read, "We are officially not broke." We celebrated with paper plates and cheap champagne. For the first time since my dismissal, I laughed without forcing myself. Then my phone displayed Paige's name. I almost ignored the call. Almost. "What do you want?" Her voice was sweet. "I heard about your little project." "Then you already know enough." "Adrian thinks it's amusing." "I'm glad I'm still entertaining him." Paige paused. "We're engaged." The room around me seemed to quiet, though Lena and Caleb were still laughing near the conference table. Paige continued before I could respond. "The wedding will be in September. The family is thrilled." My grip tightened around the phone. "Did you call to invite me?" She laughed. "No. I called because you have a habit of embarrassing yourself publicly. I don't want you appearing at the ceremony." "I would rather attend my own funeral." "Good. Then we understand each other." Before ending the call, she added, "Adrian says you should stop using ideas developed at Morgan Thompson Group. He's trying to be generous by not involving lawyers." There it was, the real purpose of the call. "You mean the idea I proposed before you worked there? The company owns everything you created. Tell Adrian to send the paperwork." "He will." The following week, North Star received a cease and desist letter accusing us of stealing proprietary technology. The letter was copied to several investors and prospective clients. Within hours, 2 meetings were postponed. Marcus walked into my office holding the document. "This was designed to frighten everyone around us. It's working." "Can they prove ownership?" "No." "Can you prove you created the concept independently?" I opened a cabinet and removed an old external drive. I never delete anything. The drive contained dated prototypes, personal notes, and emails showing that I had designed the system before Morgan Thompson Group's restructuring. There was even a message from Adrian dismissing the technology as an expensive distraction. Marcus smiled when he saw it. "Remind me never to lie to you in writing." I sent the evidence to our attorney. But Adrian was not finished. A week before, I was scheduled to speak at the National Technology Leadership Conference. An anonymous article appeared online. It described me as a disgruntled former employee attempting to capitalize on confidential company information. The article never named Adrian or Paige as sources. It did not need to. Several former colleagues shared it. One added the caption, "Some people confuse ambition with entitlement." I stared at the post until my face burned. Caleb found me sitting alone in the conference room. "You know it isn't true," he said. "That does not mean people won't believe it." "Then make them stop believing it?" His certainty reminded me how young he was. It also reminded me that he had trusted me with the beginning of his career. I could not afford to disappear. The morning of the conference, I stood backstage wearing a charcoal suit and a white blouse, listening as the host introduced me. Through a gap in the curtain, I saw hundreds of people seated in the auditorium. Investors, reporters, former clients, and in the third row, Adrian and Paige. Paige wore a red dress and a victorious smile. Adrian leaned toward her and whispered something that made them both laugh. My hands went cold. Marcus stood beside me. "You can leave," he said quietly. "No one would blame you." "They would." "Then give them something else to talk about." My name was announced. I stepped onto the stage. For the first minute, my voice felt too thin. I could sense the audience evaluating me, measuring the rumors against the woman standing beneath the lights. Then I stopped thinking about Adrian. I began talking about the technology. The platform predicted disruptions before they reached supply chains, allowing businesses to reroute shipments, reduce waste, and respond to emergencies in real time. I explained the failures that had inspired it, the early models that had not worked, and the improvements Northstar had developed. The audience leaned forward. When I reached the final slide, I displayed the date of my first prototype. It had been created 18 months before Morgan Thompson Group claimed ownership. Then I showed Adrian's old email beneath it. "Interesting theory," his message read. "But I don't see any commercial future in it." A low murmur moved through the room. I did not accuse him. I did not mention the lawsuit. I simply said, "Innovation often looks unnecessary to people who are comfortable with the present." The applause began slowly. Then the entire room rose. Adrian did not stand. Paige's smile had vanished. After the presentation, reporters surrounded me. Investors requested meetings. 2 clients who had postponed discussions asked to reschedule immediately. By evening, Northstar had received enough commitments to fund another year of operations. The cease and desist letter quietly disappeared. Morgan Thompson Group issued no public statement. But Adrian sent me a private message. "You enjoyed humiliating me," I replied. "I presented my work." "You knew what displaying that email would do." "You wrote it." He did not respond. Over the next 6 months, Northstar grew faster than any of us had predicted. We moved into a larger office, hired 12 employees, and secured our first national contract. The long nights did not stop, but they began producing visible results. Meanwhile, rumors about Morgan Thompson Group became harder to ignore. Projects were delayed. Senior engineers resigned. Clients complained that Adrian promised features the company could not deliver. Paige, now executive vice president, appeared in magazines wearing expensive clothing and talking about leadership, though no one could explain what she actually managed. Then, their wedding invitation arrived. It was addressed to my parents, but my mother sent me a photograph of it with one sentence: "We hope you will respect the family and stay away." The ceremony was being held at the same hotel where Adrian had publicly fired me. I deleted the message. On the wedding day, I remained at Northstar, finalizing the largest partnership of my career. The agreement came from Ellison Global, a technology corporation with offices across 3 continents. Instead of acquiring Northstar as they had first proposed, they agreed to invest $40 million while allowing me to retain control. When I signed the contract, Marcus handed me a glass of champagne. "To getting what you deserve," he said. The phrase made me think of Paige raising her glass with Adrian at the Hawthorne bar. But this felt different. They had celebrated taking something that belonged to someone else. I was celebrating something I had built myself. That evening, photographs of the wedding appeared online. Paige stood beside Adrian in a cathedral-length gown, surrounded by my smiling relatives. My mother had written beneath one image, "A perfect beginning for 2 people who were meant to find each other." For a moment, the old grief returned. Then, Lena entered my office carrying the finalized Ellison contract. "We did it," she whispered. I looked at the document. $40 million. International distribution. Controlling ownership still in my name. "Yes," I said. "We did." 3 weeks later, I received an encrypted email from someone inside Morgan Thompson Group. The sender did not identify themselves. The message contained financial statements, canceled contracts, and internal warnings Adrian had hidden from investors. Morgan Thompson Group was not expanding. It was collapsing. At the bottom of the email was one final sentence. "They are preparing to blame you for everything. You should know what is coming." Attached was a draft legal complaint accusing me of sabotaging the company after my termination. Adrian and Paige had already taken my job, my relationship, and my family. Now they intended to use my success as evidence that I had destroyed them. I stared through the windows at the North Star logo illuminated across the building opposite mine. They still believed I was defending myself. They had not yet realized I was finally strong enough to attack. The bride, the groom, and the company. They lost. 6 months after North Star announced its partnership with Ellison Global, Morgan Thompson Group was unraveling faster than anyone expected. Clients were canceling contracts. Investors were demanding answers. Senior engineers resigned almost every week, taking years of experience with them. Industry publications that had once praised Adrian as a visionary were now questioning whether the company's spectacular rise had been built on promises it could no longer keep. North Star, meanwhile, had become the company everyone wanted to work with. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, my assistant knocked on my office door. "Charlotte," she said carefully. "Adrian Thompson and Paige Morgan are here." I looked up from my laptop. "They don't have appointments." I told them that. "And?" They said this couldn't wait. I smiled for the first time that morning. "Send them in." A few moments later, the two people who had destroyed my life walked into the office I had built without them. The difference between us was impossible to ignore. When I had stood in Adrian's office months earlier, I had been the desperate one. Now, the desperation belonged to them. Adrian looked exhausted. Dark circles framed his eyes, and the confidence that once made boardrooms follow his every word had disappeared. Paige still dressed impeccably, but the nervous way she clutched her designer handbag betrayed the panic beneath her polished appearance. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Finally, Adrian cleared his throat. "Charlotte, thank you for seeing us." I folded my hands on the desk. "What do you need?" He exchanged a quick glance with Paige before answering. "Morgan Thompson Group is in serious financial trouble. I've read the reports. We've lost 3 major clients." "I know. Our investors are threatening legal action." "I know that too." His shoulders slumped. "We need your help." The room fell silent. Months earlier, I had begged him for an explanation. Today, he was asking me for mercy. Paige stepped forward. "If North Star invested in Morgan Thompson Group, both companies would benefit." I almost laughed. "Would they?" She forced a smile. "We could merge resources." I leaned back in my chair. "When you fired me, did either of you worry about what would benefit me?" Neither answered. Adrian spoke again. "We made mistakes." "No," I corrected him calmly. "You made choices." He lowered his eyes. "I know I hurt you." "You didn't just hurt me." I stood and slowly walked toward the window overlooking the city. "You stole my company. You stole my future. You destroyed my relationship with my own family. And then you tried to convince the industry that I was the one who betrayed you." Behind me, no one spoke. Finally, I turned around. But despite everything, hope briefly appeared in Adrian's eyes. "I am willing to help." Paige immediately smiled. "I knew you'd." I wasn't finished. The smile disappeared. "I won't save Morgan Thompson Group." Their expressions froze. "I will purchase your remaining contracts, hire any employees who wish to leave, and guarantee that your clients continue receiving uninterrupted service." Adrian stared at me. "You want to take over the company." "I want to protect the people who still depend on it." Paige's composure cracked. You planned this. No, I answered. I planned my recovery. Your collapse belongs to you. She slammed both hands onto my desk. You've been waiting for revenge. I looked directly into her eyes. If revenge had been my goal, I would have done exactly what you did. I would have lied. I would have manipulated everyone around me. I would have smiled while taking everything you loved. I paused. Instead, I built something better. The conference room fell completely silent. A week later, negotiations began. As our legal teams reviewed Morgan Thompson Group's finances, another surprise surfaced. Hidden among the documents were emails showing that Page had secretly negotiated with investors behind Adrian's back. If the IPO had succeeded, she planned to remove Adrian as CEO within a year and consolidate control under herself. Adrian stared at the documents in disbelief. You said we were building this together. Paige folded her arms. I was building my future. You used me? She gave a bitter laugh. You used Charlotte first. Don't pretend you're the victim now. For the first time since everything began, Adrian had nothing to say. The silence was punishment enough. News of the negotiations spread quickly. Only then did my parents call. My mother cried before I even answered. We were wrong. I listened quietly. We should have believed you. My father spoke next. We'd like to come see you. Months earlier, I would have done anything to hear those words. Now they sounded strangely distant. I hope you both have peaceful lives, I said softly. But I can't go back to being the daughter you only believed after I became successful. Neither of them argued. The call ended with tears. Mine never came. 2 weeks later, the acquisition was finalized. Northstar absorbed Morgan Thompson Group's largest contracts, welcomed dozens of talented employees, and ensured every client experienced a seamless transition. Morgan Thompson Group officially announced that it would cease independent operations. The company I had once built no longer existed. On the morning the final documents were signed, I walked through the new headquarters before anyone else arrived. Sunlight poured through the glass walls. Engineers laughed in nearby meeting rooms. Young graduates filled whiteboards with impossible ideas, just as Adrian and I once had. Only this time, no one could erase my name from the door. Marcus joined me beside the window. Any regrets? I thought about Adrian, about Paige, about the family that had abandoned me. Then I looked at the thousands of people whose livelihoods now depended on the company we had created together. None, I answered. Because I finally understood something I hadn't known on that cold Tuesday morning when the termination email appeared. They had never stolen my future, only my past. And the future had always belonged to the person willing to build it again.